Thank you. I guess there is no silence. At COP27, there are voices everywhere, but we are delighted to have you all this afternoon. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Azza Karam, who is the Secretary General of Religions for Peace International. Azza, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. Peace be upon you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I guess, good. Thank you for confirming. Thank you very much, Ms. Bani Dugal. I just wish to formally welcome everyone. I'm very grateful on behalf of the partners that we have with us here today to be able to say that this is unfortunately, I can't be with you, but it's important that you are there together. We are very grateful as Religions for Peace to be able to work together with the Baha'i International community, with the Anglican Consultative Council, and with the Tzu Chi Foundation to put this side event together. As you know, this is an important moment in our history. We have a tremendous serious challenge ahead of us, as the Secretary General of the United Nations said, and one just needs to paraphrase him. We're going on the path to hell with our feet very strongly on the pedal, fully firmly on the pedal. I don't think there's a more dire warning than this. The question, of course, becomes what is it that is the value added and the absolute necessity, the imperative of engaging with diverse faith-based organizations. I mean, as you can see from the partners around this table, we are many faith-based organizations coming from different religious traditions, and Religions for Peace is an interfaith organization. It's one of the oldest, largest, and most representative. The point is why? Why would we need to work together as religious? Why do the religious need to be part of this space? Well, because they're the oldest service providers, and they're the ones who actually, religious institutions all around the world actually own land. So they are, as landowners and as landlords, they have a very important role to play in the physical management of the assets, the physical assets of our environment. But they are also some of the most powerful influencers of human behavior. Sometimes they can influence us to do good things. Sometimes they may not influence us to do good things. And sometimes the silence in and of itself can be a determination not to influence, or to influence in different ways. In other words, religious institutions, religious actors of diverse kinds, religious leaders, religious organizations, NGOs, have this opportunity, this moment, and the duty to change behaviors that are in our environment, to be able to make a case and argue convincingly in so many different pulpits, because religious actors have pulpits like no one else, No one else, including the United Nations, in all its massive glory, actually has the same pulpits as the religious leaders and institutions in this world. And therefore, these pulpits can be used to influence behavioral change, to influence politicians and policymakers to take their influence us as citizens, everyday, ordinary believers who listen to our sermons, who listen to our religious leaders, to influence us to behave in different ways that can actually save our environment together. So in addition to being managers of physical assets, religious institutions are also powerful behavioral change agents and actors, and they are very, very powerful in being able to levy their significant weight politically and be able to change the course of elections, as we've seen in several countries around the world, including some of the largest countries and democracies. Religious institutions have remarkable power. The question is not whether religion should be engaged. The question is how. And there are two important things to keep in mind. This meeting is important. The other 40 faith-based related meetings are also deeply important. But what's even more important is how these different religious actors can come together to invest in each other's ability to do effective programs and initiatives. And they can start, and they do start, with their own religious institutions, their own religious infrastructure. Our challenge is not lack of will. Our challenge is not even lack of resources. Our challenge is sometimes the lack of knowledge, and I don't think anybody can claim that anymore, because if there's anything that there's plenty of, is information. But the issue here centrally is, are religious actors of diverse kinds ready, willing, and able to work together and actually pool their resources on concrete initiatives? Unfortunately, the trend that we are seeing today is that religious leaders speak of incredible goodwill and say very good things that need to be said, but we don't necessarily see a translation into interreligious or multi-religious actions. And where there are actions, we find a plethora of different religious actors deciding to set up their own shop, their own program, their own initiatives, and not to join forces with one another. And we can't afford that anymore. We can't afford to each do our own thing. Imagine if every single Catholic institution were to come together and work together. By the way, it never happens, but imagine if it were to happen, it would still not be enough. If every single Muslim institution were to come together and work together, it would still not be enough. The challenge is that we have to work together across religious actors, across national and across geographical boundaries. Even sometimes just differing with one another, we still have to work together to save this environment. And that's a very real challenge. We have heard from secular civil society and from many nations, and that's why we are talking about the weakness of multilateralism. We've heard that it's very challenging to work together. We don't have that luxury. We absolutely have to set the example. Religious institutions, religious actors have to work together if our environment is to be saved. But they not only have to work together, they have to work with their governments and with other secular civil society actors. That is the only way that we will reach the tipping point that will make a difference, because our environment is burning anyway. The only thing we can actually do is work together to save what there is amongst us. Working together is the hardest challenge, and it's a challenge I would lay here for you as a very important and a critical part of framing some of the conversations you're about to do. Don't only speak about how wonderful the religious institution and the religious community is, but let's mention how we work together. In Religions for Peace, we have the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, seeking to save 75% of the world's remaining rainforest. In order to do so, we know that even as Religions for Peace, even as the largest multi-religious organization in the world with all the religious institutions represented, it isn't enough. We work with other religious organizations, we work with governments and secular civil society actors, and with the United Nations. That's the only way to do it. It's through those different multisectoral partnerships. I have the great privilege, and thank you very much for being able to introduce a very distinguished speaker on this panel today. Mr. Malcolm Dalesa is the newly appointed climate attaché from Vanuatu to the United Nations, mission in New York. His role is to help Vanuatu's Special Envoy on Climate Change and Permanent Representative to the UN to raise the ICJ campaign profile, expand advocacy and cooperation with overseas countries and parties. And we all know that the Republic of Vanuatu is building a growing coalition of states, exactly, seeking an advisory opinion on climate change from the International Court of Justice. It's important, it's imperative that you are with us here today. Thank you very much, Mr. Malcolm Dalesa. And with that, I hand over back to you, and I thank you each and all once again.
Thank you very much, Azra. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a pleasure to be part of this panel. And at the onset, I'd like to thank the organizers in such that Vanuatu will be part of this event. Vanuatu has no doubt that it will show the spirit of unity that the spaces like COP will need if we want to work together. And as we've heard Azra mention, the working together is critical. Working together as one human family in a just and equitable world. As such, the fundamental thing that we need is that critical and vital spirit of unity in a consultative manner to ensure that there is long and sustained change. And the truth is, change must always happen at the local level, and the local level involves the very vulnerable and people in all walks of life. And it will need that coordination, the synergy at the higher level, and the collective way of working together that will bridge and collaborate and create the synergies that is required at those various levels, from the local to the national and right up to the international. And for Vanuatu, most of the action at the local level we're currently seeing is being implemented by the youths. And as mentioned by Azra, we are currently working with this, bringing this advisory opinion on climate change to the International Court of Justice, which was instigated from the youths themselves. And the youths are taking action as they have the time, the energy, the vibrancy, and the various knowledges that they bring to the table to an ever advancing civilization. Their detachment in some regards to political issues and their concern for the future gives them the energy to engage and the drive in any action, and they will require the guidance from the institutions, from the states and various civil societies, as well as the communities themselves. And we've been very fortunate, and especially with Vanuatu, as I'm speaking, that we've been working particularly through the Ministry of Youth and Sports, which has provided that platform, particularly at the national level, to the sub-national or provincial level, by which youths are very much actively engaged in the implementation of Vanuatu's policies, and especially as far as the SDGs concerned at the local level. And a good example that I would like to draw attention to is the engagement of the youth, as I've mentioned, with the advisory opinion that Vanuatu is taking lead on, and that has as well helped to galvanize and create the synergies and partnerships and fostering the bridges with various other youth movements across the globe. And Vanuatu as well is only one of the only countries, a few, where civil societies, communities and all stakeholders work together for the betterment of the communities, especially coming to the table as far as putting together climate change policies or initiatives. And a clear example is with the COP. We have a Vanuatu delegation that comprises of both the NGOs, the youths, and the national or government entities working together and negotiating together. And that shows the spirit of unity and collaboration that is very much required between all stakeholders to work for a common good. And we very much hear and the point raised by Azra in the opening remarks in terms of the different religious entities needing to work together, to collaborate and move together, and to ensure there's real tangible action. And in working together, there's a powerful impact that can be done. And to finish, I would like to say that without centralizing our actions around the human values and the harmonization between science, religion, our actions will only lead to unsustainable and destructive developments. This COP and all future COP must integrate these values while negotiating and finding ways to solve our common crisis, the climate crisis. With that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. De Lessa. I think Azza posed some questions and you promptly answered them with your feedback, and we'll revisit that at the end. But it's now my pleasure to turn over the program to our moderator for the day. Mr. Daniel Perell is my colleague at, in many ways, but he represents the Baha'i international community to the United Nations and is also co-chair of the Coalition for the UN We Need. And I realize I did not introduce myself. I'm Bani Dugal, and I'm co-president of Religions for Peace and also the principal representative of the Baha'i international community to the UN. So over to Dan.
Well, thank you so much, Bani, and thank you to Azza and Mr. Malcolm Dalesa for those helpful opening remarks. So it's clear to me that everyone on this panel, everyone in this room, everyone at COP27, all 40,000 of us in this brutal Egyptian heat, and everyone around the world is increasingly aware of the challenges we face. We needn't go into detail about them. We're increasingly aware of the type of future we want, one where all are provided with the necessities of life, including a healthy environment, not to mention a homeland. The fundamental question, it seems, at the heart of this conversation is the following. If we agree that the status quo is insufficient, and if we agree on a better future for all without discrimination, how can we truly center those human values and the vision for the future and let short-term gains not be the metric which ultimately guides us? Here, I believe faith communities, in addition to many other well-wishers of humanity, are providing some fundamental contributions, and we've heard a couple already. So thank you again to Malcolm and to Azza for laying the groundwork for the rest of the conversation. And I would just encourage those in the audience, I know it's very tempting to look at the phones and to check the emails, I do the same, but I would encourage you to try and think of some questions to ask, because this is, we hope, a different type of panel, a different type of gathering that's not just doom and gloom and numbers and data, but it's about the human character and what it is we all hope to get out of the lives that we're living. So with that, it's my honor to introduce two video messages, so you can feel free to look at your phones while listening to them because they can't see it. I'll introduce two video messages. The first is from Her Excellency Ms. Maria Fernanda Espinosa. She's a member of the group of women leaders, former president of the UN General Assembly, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Minister of Defense for Ecuador. So Maria Fernanda, your video has the floor. Hopefully we'll get audio as well, because otherwise it's going to be tough to know what she's saying. So, she's saying excellent things, I promise you. Very insightful, very profound. So, we have a colleague running to the back to figure this out. We'll give it another minute, and if it doesn't work, then we'll go straight to the panel over to my left. Thank you so much, Steve. Steve is our tech guru, making sure that everything runs smoothly.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you to Religions for Peace, the Anglican Communion, Buddhist Sushi, and the Baha'i International Community. Dear friends and colleagues, it is my pleasure to be with you today, though unfortunately I am unable to be there in person. The discussion you are having is a vital element if humanity is to meet the goals set out in the Paris Agreement. At this moment in history, humanity is blessed with scientific knowledge, the policy understanding, and the consensus needed to make change. Unfortunately, however, a fourth ingredient, that of courage, of resolve, and intergenerational responsibility, is missing. We know that scientifically we are abundantly clear about what is happening to the climate. The IPCC has laid out in stark detail and with a clear message the challenge before us. It represents perhaps the highest level of consensus we can achieve. Unfortunately, as we also know, these reports still understate the threat before us, as they are to a degree consensus documents. Fortunately, we also have a clear understanding of the policies that can ensure a climate-safe future for generations to come. One clear example is that clean energy is now more efficient and abundant than fossil fuels. Yet oil production and gas is highly incentivized by the demand side on a magnitude beyond belief. If resources and investment go in the right direction, especially to the developing oil-dependent countries, we know the effects could be transformational. It would be desirable, for example, to see investment towards adaptation, towards loss and damage and mitigation, towards a just transition, to innovation, and to subsidizing clean sources of energy. These are only examples, of course. And finally, the existential nature of the threat before us has galvanized member states to levels of agreement and consensus rarely seen in any other field of endeavor. This is remarkable as an opportunity. Yet, despite these three elements, science and knowledge, policy, and wide consensus, we still see a gap between knowledge and action, between words on a page and their implementation on the ground. This gap is not easy to bridge. It requires courage, integrity, ethics, responsibility. It requires putting the medium and long-term needs of humanity before the short-term gains. As a matter of fact, an objective reading of the situation demonstrates that this courage could have short-term gains. So, what role can faith play? Whether one understands faith as a religious element, or faith in humanity, or faith in the United Nations, or all of the above, faith is often what drives us to action. Regardless of the specific doctrine, it is undeniable that faith is able to galvanize action in a way that the UN could learn from. The leap from words on a page to action in the field, from rhetoric to impact, is something that may offer important lessons about ambition, about ethics, and shared endeavor. We cannot assume that science necessarily leads to policy change. If that were the case, we would have seen it long ago. What we need is a commitment to something higher than ourselves or our interests, whether that is thinking about our children and grandchildren, the nature we depend on, the beautiful vistas we hope future generations can enjoy. These motivating factors must be drawn upon as opposed to the pursuit of power or monetary gain, as the bridge between science and policy. I strongly believe that a new path for the future requires a value-based multilateral system with a value-based leadership and integrity, intergenerational and feminist environment leadership, leading towards a better politics and better governance. And this, believe me, it's not an abstract statement. It means to transit from greed to solidarity and redistribution of wealth and power, from prejudice radical love for humankind and for nature. It will take new norms of collaboration, the centering of new values, and this, of course, is the space for ethics, for intergenerational and whole of society approaches. This is how ambition can be reached, by pairing science with integrity and courage. This is our work, our collective work ahead. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Maria Fernanda. She's joining us from Argentina in spirit. I think that this point you've made about, well, she can't really hear me, but the point that she made about what it is that drives us, what motivates us, and the role that faith, however we understand faith, can play in galvanizing us to change our behavior, sometimes against our material advancements in favor of human collective endeavor. I think that's a very helpful contribution. So thank you, Maria Fernanda, for that video message. So we'll turn now to His Excellency Judge Mohamed Abdelsalam. He's a senior representative of His Eminence Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, the Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Elders, and co-president of Religions for Peace in Egypt. So Judge Abdelsalam, you have the floor.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحضور الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يشرفني أن أكون معكم اليوم لنتحدث عن أحد أهم القضايا التي تشغل عالمنا المعاصر، وأقول أحد أكبر مهددات السلم العالمي في العصر الحديث، قضية التغيرات المناخية. هذه القضية والظاهرة التي تدق ناقوس الخطر أعلى فأعلى يوما بعد يوم، مطالبة باتخاذ إجراءات حاسمة يساهم فيها كل البشر بصفتهم فاعلين ومعنيين. فالتقلبات في درجة الحرارة تطال اليوم كل الأنظمة البيولوجية عبر العالم، مهددة الأمن الغذائي للمجتمع الإنساني عبر تضخم معدلات الجفاف والفقر، مخلفة من ضمن ما تخلفه فيضانات وموجات حر وحرائق وعواصف تهدد حياة الملايين حول الأرض بالانهيارات الزراعية والمجاعات والجفاف والمرض ونشوب الصراعات حول الموارد. الحقيقة أن إثارة هذا النقاش حول قضية التغير المناخي لم يكن يوما ضربا من الترف، ولعل الصور التي بتنا نراها كل يوم في السنوات القليلة الأخيرة أكبر دليل على قدر المخاوف التي يشكلها هذا الموضوع. لذا فإن هذه الظاهرة لا تقل إلحاحا عن الظواهر الاجتماعية والاقتصادية كالبطالة والركود وغيرها من القضايا الأخرى التي توليها الحكومات أهمية وأولوية كبرى. لكن القلق الذي يثيره الموضوع هو ذا بعد وجودي يهدد استمرار الجنس البشري فوق الأرض. لقد ظلت الرؤى المادية للتنمية رغم كل محاولات الانفتاح على أبعاد الإنسانية والشمول والاستدامة قاصرة عن بلوغ أهدافها الأساس، وهي إعادة بناء قيم التنمية في الضمير الإنساني والوصول إلى تغيير سلوك الأفراد في حياتهم اليومية ونمط عيشهم، وذلك بالانتقال من الفردانية والتكاثر المادي إلى التراحم وقيم المسؤولية الاجتماعية المشتركة. لقد أكدت الأديان السماوية كلها في مقدمتها الإسلام ممثلة بخطاب ورموز قادتها عبر العالم على ضرورة المحافظة على كوكب الأرض بيتنا المشترك، ورعاية التوازن والتناغم فيه بما يجسد لعظمة الخالق ومصدر رزق الخلائق، داعين إلى بناء حضارات خضراء تحترم البيئة انطلاقا من وعي رصين بقيمتها وهشاشتها أيضا، وبأنها تلك مسؤولية كل المؤمنين أيا كان دينهم. انطلاقا من هذه المسؤولية التي نرمز إليها في الإسلام بمفهوم خلافة الإنسان في الأرض مصداقا لقوله تعالى: إني جاعل في الأرض خليفة، يبقى الحفاظ على الموارد الطبيعية وتوزيعها بالقسط بين الإنسان والحيوان والنبات أمر لا غنى عنه. وبهذه المناسبة نعيد التذكير بالنداء المشترك والتاريخي الذي وقعت عليه الرموز الدينية في حاضرة الفاتيكان في أكتوبر الماضي، وأرسلوا بندائهم هذا وصرختهم هذه إلى كوب 26، ونأمل أن ينتج عن كوب 27 استراتيجيات وخطط عمل تسهم بشكل جاد وفاعل وحقيقي في إنقاذ الكوكب من هذه الكارثة. كذلك أحب أن أنوه أن استضافة جمهورية مصر العربية لمؤتمر الأطراف لاتفاقية الأمم المتحدة للمناخ هذا العام كوب 27 هي فرصة لجنوب العالم وشرقه لإطلاق نقاش عادل ومنصف في قلب قمة العمل المناخي العالمي، وأيضا سماع مخاوف ومطالب البلدان النامية والأكثر تضررا من هذه الظاهرة في هذا الصدد. وهي أيضا دعوة لكل دول العالم للاعتراف بأن أزمة المناخ تعبر عن إشكالية مشتركة وملحة وتشمل الجميع وتعني الجميع، وتقتضي تعبئة كل الأطراف لوضع خطط تحول مناخي شجاعة وتوزيع الموارد والطاقة بشكل عاجل لأجل بناء عالم مستدام يعيش فيه الجميع في سلام. إن مؤسسة أديان من أجل السلام تهتم بهذه القضية اهتماما بالغا وتبذل جهودا متعددة لمناقشتها ووضعها دائما في خططها وأهدافها المستقبلية من أجل الإسهام مع قادة ورموز الأديان حول العالم في تقديم حلول عملية لهذه الظاهرة الكارثية من خلال التأثير والنفوذ الروحي لقادة ورموز الأديان في كل مكان حول العالم، والذين تضم أديان من أجل السلام العديد منهم في أماكن ومناطق مختلفة من عالمنا هذا. ولا شك فإن قادة ورموز الأديان يقع على عاتقهم مسؤولية كبيرة في التذكير دائما بهذه القضية الكارثية التي يجب أن يكون الإنسان في كل مكان طرفا في الإسهام في علاج هذه الظاهرة. منذ عدة أيام انعقد ملتقى البحرين الدولي للحوار من أجل التعايش الإنساني. هذا الملتقى الهام الذي حضره الإمام الأكبر شيخ الأزهر البابا فرانسيس، بابا الكنيسة الكاثوليكية، أحد أهم الرموز المسيحية في العالم، والعديد من قادة الأديان والمذاهب المختلفة، والذين ركزوا بشكل أساسي على أهمية قضية التغير المناخي، وأهمية أن يكون للشعوب كاملة دور في معالجة هذه الظاهرة المخيفة. وكذلك أرسلوا بندائهم إلى كل الدول المجتمعة في مؤتمر الأطراف COP 27 بأن يوحدوا الجهود وأن يقدموا للعالم وللمجتمعات خططا تنفيذية لمعالجة هذه الكارثة. وإن شاء الله نأمل أن يؤتي هذا المؤتمر المهم ثماره، وأن يساهم بقدر كبير في طمأنة الناس، في طمأنة الشعوب، في طمأنة البشر أيا كانوا حول العالم، لأن هذه الظاهرة المخيفة لا تهدد فقط منطقة بعينها، وإنما تهدد العالم كله، وبالتأكيد نحن نرى ونلمس هذا. شكرا جزيلا وأتمنى لكم التوفيق، وكم وددت أن أكون معكم ولكن لظروف طارئة لم أتمكن من الحضور. شكرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you so much once again to His Excellency Judge Mohamed Abdelsalam for those remarks. One thing that stood out to me was this idea of stewardship, and I think we'll hear more about that in particular from some of the younger colleagues who will be sharing. I think I'm also some of the younger colleagues, but some of the other younger colleagues will be sharing some thoughts later today. It's really important that we always conceive of the future as we are engaging in the present. And so I think with that, I'll turn straight away to Bishop Julio Thompson, who is the Bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Panama and Chairman of the Anglican Communion Environmental Network. Bishop, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and as I say thanks, I also recognize and appreciate this strategic opportunity as partners in the faith-based organizations coming together. Thanks to World Conference of Religions for Peace, the Buddhist Tzu Chi Foundation, the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'i Community, and the Anglican Consultative Council of the Anglican Communion. This is already a first step or an opportunity to give an example of some of the things that we can do, concrete actions coming together. You and I know the facts, that the current times are challenging and also decisive times. The response to the climate crisis has been inadequate in terms of resources and level of urgency. With this, a part of the facts here we are at COP27, participating in this panel, sharing experiences with the hope to identify more actors with the will and the decision to help transform the nightmare in which we live. As faith-based organizations, there is an opportunity to prepare calls to present to governments, government leaders, and other actors to reimagine actions and strategies to stop the devastating effects of climate change on the lives of human beings locally and globally. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, states in the policy paper that we have prepared to share that the COVID-19 pandemic has forced the world to look at the way we have been living and operating. We have been confronted by our behavior and attitude, by our sin of selfishness, our greed and consumption, our human fragility, our exploitation of the environment. End of quote. For some people, this is normal. But for many around the world, these attitudes are unethical and immoral. At the heart of the Anglican identity in our baptismal covenant There is the statement to respect the dignity of every human being, a mandate to respond to human need by loving service, to transform unjust structures of society, to challenge violence of every kind and pursue peace and reconciliation, and also to safeguard the integrity of creation and sustain and renew the life of the earth. This is a holistic engagement with the world reflected in the eyes and the practices of Jesus and his mission to bring good news to the poor, release to the oppressed, and abundant life for all. This is what is at stake at the moment. This is what we should be looking to work towards. But again, there have been 27 COPs, and maybe we're going into the 28th. And what we are expecting to see is still yet to be delivered. As a global, connected body with the shared identity that transcends national borders, the Anglican Communion has a distinctive perspective of climate change. We have an overview. The member churches of the Anglican Communion are involved in every part of the story of climate change. We are the people facing devastation in disaster-stricken communities. We are the polluters in wealthy countries. We are the people living in poverty and on the margins. We yield power and political influence. We are experiencing loss and damage on our lands, our home, and our livelihood. We are investors with financial capital. We are first responders to disasters and those who accompany communities on the journey of recovery and resilience. We contribute to the problem. We contribute also to the solution. We are both local and global, connected by our faith. We connect with one another, share our experiences, and we can leverage our networks and shared identity to mobilize for climate justice and climate action. Because we do not speak from one position, but from many, and we do not speak to others, we also speak to ourselves. These paradoxes presented here are the reason we identify that our moral imperative is indisputable, as the effect of climate change, including extreme weather in the places that have been experiencing hurricanes and floods and temperature change and rising sea levels, are felt most keenly in the global poor, who have also benefited the least from the economic activities that cause it. Moreover, climate change is accelerating poverty and inequity in the present, meaning that unless we address the urgency, it will continue to diminish future generation opportunity for development goals achievement. The moral and economic imperative is to act on climate change. This imperative cannot be stronger. Perhaps another unity of analysis needs to happen. Aside from analyzing country governments, maybe we need to analyze corporations as well, who have long left their headquartered nations' borders to establish profitably public interest and the ability of cooperation to externalize cost and internalize gain. Michael Mann, a world-leading climate scientist, said, "The great tragedy on the climate crisis is that 7.5 billion people must pay the price in the form of a degraded planet, so that a couple of dozen polluting interests can continue to make record profit. It is a great moral failing of our political system that we have allowed this to happen." What is the church up to? What are faith organizations up to? Our faith compels us to love our neighbor. It teaches that we are all made in God's image, that the earth belongs to God and the people belong to God, that we are all deeply interconnected. If one part of the body hurts, all parts will hurt. We are people of hope. We believe in metanoia, a transformative change of heart and mind that is about turning around, seeing things differently, and setting out on a new life-giving path. We find inspiration in those who have gone before us, working courageously for social change in times past. We know that transformation is not going to be easy, but it is possible. As people of faith, we have a long view, looking both backwards through time to our roots and forward to a future hope. As people of faith, as Jesus' teachings in Luke 17:5, we are calling on other people of faith to act together on this issue called climate change. It is not only a call to win-win situations, it is a call to add in the situation. There are some key messages that I will leave with you that are presented in our Anglican Communion policy priorities that I would share later. But I just want to share the fact that climate emergency is a global threat that requires a global response, but a local action. Imagination and long term. The solution will not be easy if countries are gauged by nationalistic self-interest, but by a global understanding. Faith actors are important and must be included as partners in building resilience, coordinating disaster responses, because churches are present with communities before, during, and after the emergency. The church leaders also have a prophetic role to play in proclaiming climate justice, inspire mutual understanding and collective responsibility. This prophetic role is better utilized when it is well informed. This call for an interdisciplinary work with other sectors in society, people and relationship are at the heart of the community resilience. Earlier we heard about the participation of young people. They are also seeking effects in inaction because of what is happening every day. And they are saying to government that they need to be more action, but they are also saying to faith-based organizations, you can do more. And I think we don't only need to listen to them, but we need to walk alongside them and see to it that more is done. More needs to be done. That is the reason for many young people involved in driving climate action at the local, national, and international level. They are involved in concrete actions. They are the ones raising awareness of the impact of climate change. They are the ones developing seedling nurseries. They are the ones incorporating tree planting into the life of the church. They are the ones that during life events, they are also incorporating the planting of trees at confirmations, wedding, and baptism. They are the ones putting together the vegetable gardens. They are the ones doing advocacy on issues that require political action as well. But again, there's another group that hasn't been mentioned. It's women. Women, indigenous people, and African descent, the most vulnerable communities. The indigenous perspective of the climate urgency and stewardship of natural resources are both practical and spiritual responses. But here it is. The indigenous people are present at the COP, but guess what? Their voice are not loud enough and active enough in the places where decisions are being made. And again, another perspective and another part of playing into what needs to happen is their teaching, their spirituality that has this close relation to Mother Earth. How important it is for us to learn from the indigenous people and their spirituality. Governments and cooperation need to fulfill their commitments already made, raise ambition, support international cooperation, and increase funding levels for building climate resilience. There is also a need for transparency and accountability. I'm talking from the part of the world that I come from, Panama. And in Panama and Central America, governments are looked upon with suspicion. I'm talking about Panama. And the level of corruption around us is so high that the people, in order to get the attention of the governments, they are on the streets crying out that accountability and corruption need to go hand in hand. But again, I'm talking about Panama, not any other place. So we are here at COP27, and we have established a loss and damage fund. It has been established here while we are beginning. It's on the agenda. But how long is it going to take to get a concrete action from loss and damage? Are we going to follow the media, and the media is going to say to us that all these things have been done, and once again, nothing has reached the people that are in need? The developing countries suggest that a dedicating loss and damage financing facility will help address the gaps. They want loss and damage funding to be new and additional, rather than drawn from existing funds already pledged for climate change, adaptation, and humanitarian relief. But the vulnerable and developing countries have pointed out various issues with current finance institutions, such as Green Climate Fund and World Bank. For example, these institutions do not provide support for non-economic loss and damage or slow onset events such as sea level rise. Yes, there is the need to respond to now, but how long is it going to take with the local bureaucracy that we have to contend with? And again, the developing counterparts, however, argue that it would be more effective to draw on and strengthen existing funding institutions for climate change, adaptation, disaster risk reduction. Where is the humanitarian assistance? It's on the paper, but it's not getting to the people that have the need. So climate change has moral and spiritual implications. Poverty and inequality and land degradation all have their roots in a social structure based on greed and individualism. Yes, a profound moral and ethical turnaround and social transformation is required to overcome this condition, but it also needs to happen with us as well. This is what Laudato Si is saying. Although the road ahead will be difficult, with new and unexpected challenges arising along the way, we can find inspiration in Nelson Mandela's famous saying, "It is always seem impossible until it's done." We face an unprecedented opportunity to achieve a more sustainable, prosperous, and socially just future. Reimagining and creating that future must start now. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Bishop Thompson, for those remarkable remarks, I'll say. It was really very helpful. One of the thoughts that comes to my mind as I hear you speaking is that we are all many things. I think many of the spaces in which we engage, they try to categorize us as you are this group of people, you are that kind of people, but we're all diverse internally. And so we all have to recognize how our needs can be met as women, as youth, as indigenous, as persons with disabilities. We can be all of those things even at one time. And so how do we understand our engagement with the world with these various facets? Add to that the layer of religiosity that so many ascribe to. So now I have the pleasure of turning the floor to Ms. Amal. She's a youth climate leader from the Church of Pakistan.
Thank you, Daniel. Good afternoon, everyone. From the Anglican Consultative Council and the Church of Pakistan, I bring sincere greetings to you all. And I also hope and trust that you are all keeping well. You are all fine this afternoon. There are some slides. I would request Steve to kindly play them. So this afternoon, when we are reflecting on climate crisis and the ethical, intergenerational, and multisectoral responses to climate crisis, I need to emphasize on a verse from the Holy Bible. Please play the next slide. Which is from the book of Psalms, chapter 24, verse 1. That says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it." I will repeat, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Now this verse simply clarifies that the earth belongs to whom? It belongs to the one who has created us all. And what does God commands us? What does He wants from us as human beings? We all are coexisting with the other nature, with animals, with the entire biodiversity, and we all under earth belongs to God. And what does God wants from us as human beings? For that, next. There is one verse from the book of Genesis from the Holy Bible which says, "The Lord God then took the man and settled him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate and care for it." I have put an emphasis on the word care for it. What does that mean? Caring for something is that simply this verse tells us that God has made us and sent us to this world to become the stewards of Mother Earth. Next. Stewardship is a responsibility. It's a responsibility on each one of us as human beings, coexisting with the other animals and even plants and all the biodiversity that we see. Stewardship is a responsibility, and God says that we need to care for it. What is the job of a steward? Everyone knows who is a steward, and I would like to say that the job of a steward is to supervise or take care of something for which the owner has given that person, that his steward, a responsibility. God is our master, and He has sent us as stewards for His creation. And our duty is to become responsible stewards, to become faithful stewards, to become accountable stewards, and to be aware. What does that mean when we talk about being responsible? That means we have to manage everything. We have to keep a check on everything when we are stewards. We need to know, we need to manage everything. If whatever our master has commanded us, then we need to be faithful. When a good steward who is faithful does not steal anything, right? That steward remains faithful. Then he has to be accountable for whatever is given, whatever is handed to that steward. He must remain accountable for that. He needs to be aware. Being aware means to keep an eye on the risk factors that are emerging because of different situations. Now, I need to ask, do you think that we have been faithful stewards? How many of you think that we have been faithful stewards towards creation? I need raised hands. Nobody thinks so. Okay. So, please next. Yeah, keep next. So these were the 4 things that I spoke on. Please next. We are not good stewards. You see, we are facing multiple and drastic climate crises in forms of forest fires. You all know that the global temperatures have risen, which are causing forest fires. Next. Which are causing melting of ice. And melting of ice means that not just the ice is being melted, biodiversity is lost. Next. The sea levels have risen to such an extent that even recently, I belong to Pakistan, and recently, please next, Pakistan has undergone a drastic flood hit. The place where I live in and the surrounding cities were the only places that were left which were not drowned. 85% of Pakistan drowned this year in just 2 months because of excessive and heavy rainfall. And please next. These are some of the statistics that I am sharing with you, and you can see how much damage this has caused. Those lives are not coming back. Those lives that have been lost are not coming back. Roads will be built. Infrastructure will be rebuilt. Everything will come again. But the lost lives, the lost livestock. In Pakistan, there are so many people whose livelihood depends on livestock. That is not coming back. Please next. Desertification is one of the cause of global rise in temperature. And because of this, you know that there are severe famine. Food shortage is there. Next. Which is causing scarcity of food and water. Many people are dying. Food is the basic necessity for a human body, and we don't have that because of the climate crisis. Next. Then because of other events, we have extreme events like hurricanes. Next. Typhoons. Please next. Keep doing heat wave. Okay. Now, these are some of the things we already know. We know that the crises are there, but why are we facing the crisis? There is one thing that I would say, that we don't want to change the way we are living. We don't want to change our lifestyle. In the country from where I come, the elite class would not like to travel by public transport. Instead, they would love having their own cars. And there are not much people in Pakistan, how many compared to the number of cars. And the roads are crowded. These things, the lifestyle of people does not only bring climate crisis, but ethical crisis as well. There was an example in one of the traffic jams, a pregnant woman was going, and because of the traffic jam, she could not reach the hospital, and her child died in between. When there is crowded parking spaces, people start fighting with each other. We are focusing on environmental concerns, the climate crisis, but with these crises, there comes ethical concerns as well. When there would be no food, people will ultimately die. This is a concern. When the livestock will be lost, there will be no livelihood for people, livelihood opportunities for people. When the agricultural land would be washed away, people cannot have sustainable farming. They cannot even take care of themselves. So these are not just climate crises, these are ethical concerns as well on which we have to focus upon. Now, please next. What can we do? What can we do as people from different sectors? Many of you are students, many of you are working from in different sectors. You might be doctors, some of you might be engineers. You are from different sectors. What role can we play? And the first thing that we can do is awareness. It all starts from awareness, especially in a country like Pakistan, for instance. 60 million people in Pakistan are illiterate. The literacy rate is just 62.3%. And even the 62.3% people doesn't know about climate change. So the first thing comes in that we need to aware people about climate change, its root causes, ways of mitigation, and then comes the solution. We need to aware people about it. Secondly, we need to have a dialogue. We need to ask people, when you aware them, then comes the dialogue. Let them assess the need which they have in their own surroundings and come up with the solution. Third thing, please next, is the implementation of policies at grassroots. Now, I have not written here that we need to make policies, because laws and policies are there, just as Archbishop Julio was saying, that it is there, but in the books. We need to implement that. We need to come out stronger and implement what is there in the books. And we can do that through, please, next. We can do that. Okay, this is one example I want to share. This is from our diocese, from our church. I would like to share some of the actions that we have taken. We aware people on the roads. You can see the bicycles, and we were promoting that we need to ride bicycles in order to reduce carbon footprint. And we raised awareness on climate change. Then we used plastic bottles and some of the used tires to plant. And also we used old fabric to create something new. These are small things that we can do. This is not something very big. You have to, remove a big stone, or you have to remove a big mountain. But these are small steps that you can all take. Next. How we can do that through, next. We can do that through education. How can we do that through education? Because it plays a key role in our learning. We can all do it. People who are sitting here who are from some educational institutes background, if you are teachers, you can play a vital role, because small young children, if you will start telling them that what is climate change, how can we protect our environment, then those things will be embedded in the learning and grooming of young children, and they would not deviate from that learning. Their lifestyle would become like that as you are grooming them. Then religious institutes. Religious institutes play a key role, and you can motivate people who are coming there to take different initiatives, environmental initiatives to as a response towards climate change. And then industry comes in. For instance, my thesis was from the industrial sector in my postgraduate studies. Industrial symbiosis was one of the examples I shared. That was a solution in which we can not exploit the virgin materials, and we can use waste as a raw material to be used as an input for manufacturing processes. So these are some of the things that we can do to create a change and as a response towards climate crisis. Next. These are some of the pictures in which our church included schools and churches of our diocese. And we, next, we collected relief and handed over to the army in the flood crisis. And these were the relief items that were sent to the flood victims in order to help those people who are in need. Next. So this line came into my mind when I was praying one day just before coming to COP27. And I was asking God, what should I speak on? What should I speak about? And this was the exact line that was coming into my mind. We need to come back to our responsibilities as stewards of Earth. And how can we do that? We can do that by using materials that biodegrade safely. We can reduce waste through recycling and some of the things that I showed you, and consider the environmental impacts in developing infrastructure and manufacturing. So these are some of the concerns. I hope this must have inspired you somewhere. So just take a step and people will follow. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Amal. But as we're running a little bit behind schedule, I'll just, without any comment, turn straight away to my friend and colleague Gopal Patel, who's faith lead for the WWF New Deal for Nature Initiative and senior advisor to the Center for Earth Ethics. And WWF is World Wildlife Fund, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. Thank you, Dan. Thank you to all the speakers before me. Thank you to the organizers of this event. You will see I'm not the speaker that was listed on the program, so thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. As Dan mentioned, I work with a number of organizations, WWF International and also the Center for Earth Ethics. And a lot of our work over the last 2 years is mobilizing faith communities specifically around biodiversity and the restoration of landscapes. And I'm going to speak about the work we've done on that and how we've worked around mobilizing faith groups and taking faith ideas and principles into the spaces of biodiversity and ecosystem restoration. Because as we know, and as we're seeing at the COPs over the last number of years, nature-based solutions, protection of biodiversity, the restoration of landscapes is getting more and more recognition as part of the critical aspect of reaching the Paris Agreement. And so, first I'd love to talk about the work we've done at the Center for Earth Ethics this past year around looking at the principles around ecosystem restoration through the lens of spirituality, values, and culture. We hosted 5 dialogues globally with religious groups, UN officials, development experts, local activists, and indigenous communities to explore what does ecosystem restoration look like in a variety of different contexts. We looked at air pollution in the United States, we looked at river pollution in India, we looked at cities in Mombasa, Kenya, we looked at the protection of the Philippine eagle in the Philippines, and we looked at food security in Jordan, and worked with a variety of stakeholders in those conversations. And what we learned through those dialogues and through those consultations are a number of ideas and principles that we are now putting forward to the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration around how can they use spiritual and cultural and values lenses towards strengthening, mobilizing, and scaling up ecosystem restoration globally. So our 10 principles are not officially launched yet, but I can give you a sneak peek about 3 or 4 of them because they're currently under review. But one of the things that came out in our dialogues was around rituals and traditions. That people all over the world have rituals and traditions that connect them to their land, to their ecosystems, and to their communities. And oftentimes in development work, in the work around addressing climate change or addressing the biodiversity crisis, we lose sight of these rituals and traditions. And they're not always just in religious communities, in non-religious, in secular, in the private sector. Everybody has certain rituals and traditions that they practice and they follow that gives them meaning and grounding to the land in which they live. And so how do we normalize the understanding of rituals and traditions in our work? Another one which is one of my favorites is, as we look to restore the outer world, the land, what does inner restoration look like? Oftentimes we have a broken relationship with the earth. Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of my teachers, famously said in one of his essays that the reason the earth is in ruin is because we are disconnected with our own self. So how do we cultivate and foster an inner restoration of ourselves and a connection to ourselves as we also restore the land as well? Another principle that really came out of our dialogues on ecosystem restoration is that of humility. How do we work with communities knowing that we do not have all the answers, knowing that we need to learn from other people, knowing that the answers may be vastly different to what we may have initially thought? So approaching this work with a humble mindset we found was really important. And one of the other principles that came out of these dialogues was relationship. Something that is so central to all of our faith and spiritual traditions is that we are in a world of relationship. We are in relationship with each other, with our communities, and with the land. And how do we ensure that relationship is central to our work around addressing climate change, biodiversity loss, and ecosystem restoration, and really center that as this work? So those are some of the ideas and principles that have come out of our work at the Center for Earth Ethics on ecosystem restoration, and they'll be being launched in the coming months. And then by extension to that, the work we're doing with WWF International around mobilizing faith-based communities around the Global Biodiversity Framework, which is going to be finalized at the CBD COP15 next month. I know this is the climate COP, but I'll put a plug in for the CBD COP, is that we are mobilizing about 30 different religious organizations from across the world. We have put forward a multi-faith response to the Global Biodiversity Framework. We have 6 priority areas for the framework from a spiritual perspective, and we'll be updating those in the coming days. And in that, what we're really saying, and at the heart, the key principle that we're saying is that we need to recognize the interconnectedness of all of creation. That we have a broken relationship with the natural world, and the web of life, creation, whatever we may want to call it, is central, and that idea needs to be at the heart of the Global Biodiversity Framework if we are to stop, reverse, and halt biodiversity loss. but we're also talking about increasing ambition when it comes to the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And crucially, we're saying, which has been spoken about here today, is that faith groups are a key actor when it comes to the implementation of restoring biodiversity. That when we talk about the implementation mechanisms of restoring and protecting biodiversity, faith groups are in every community, are on every corner, in every village. We are everywhere. As was said earlier, over 80% of the world's populations. And so faith groups need to be part of any meaningful action, policy, framework around climate action and action on biodiversity. So I know we're short on time. I just wanted to offer those few things. But again, thank you so much to Dan and the organizers for having me here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gopal. One thing that comes to my mind after hearing what you've said is that the starting assumption from which we derive all the decisions we take throughout the day is sort of the guiding light. And for many of us, the starting assumption is around comfort or material gain or profit or advocacy or position. But if the starting assumption is interconnectedness and interdependence, how would that impact the rest of the decisions we take throughout our day as individuals, as communities, as representatives of institutions? These questions, I think, are really at the heart, ultimately, the true heart of the conversations that we're having here, not the heart of funding, but the heart of change. So perhaps we can turn now to our final video contribution from Dharma Master Ms. Yuan from Tzu Chi's Jingsi abode in Hualien. Steve. We'll get there, I promise. No meeting is complete without tech challenges.
My thoughts will chill from here at the Jingsi abode in Hualien. Amazing, amazing. All beings possess the Buddha's nature of wisdom. According to the Buddhist sutras, these were the first words by the Buddha after he attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. It is widely known that Buddhism has a strong emphasis on compassion, and many might be aware of the teachings on the four immeasurables: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. But the compassion and loving kindness taught by the Buddha goes far beyond humankind. It views all sentient beings as fundamentally equal and asks us to have love and reverence even for the trees, rivers, mountains, and the earth itself. It is this teaching of compassion that inspired Tzu Chi volunteers to go beyond the words and take action to work in disaster relief, family care, and tuition aid, and in building hospitals and schools. But these teachings also inspire us to take action for the earth, whether through Tzu Chi's recycling mission, which recycled over 69 million items and saved 700,000 trees in 2021 alone, through environmental advocacy and education, and through beach and park clean-up events. Moreover, one will realize that all sentient beings are fundamentally equal to ourselves. It is unthinkable for us to eat their flesh. In fact, the body of the earth, including grains, nuts, legumes, and vegetables, provides all the nutrition humankind needs, and does it in a way that is more efficient, more environmentally friendly, and infinitely more human than eating the meat of living beings. I would like to end with a quote from the vow of Tzu Chi's commissioners. As long as we can enter through the door of compassion, we can get a glimpse of the majestic and beauty of the Buddha's teaching. Life is impermanent. Our lives slip away with each passing day. We must take the advantage of this precious life to plant good seeds and reap good fruits. I wish peace and blessing upon you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much once again to Dharma Master Ms. Yuan for that contribution. So now we have a few moments left, and the hope is that we can have some time for questions. And I saw one right away. So Steve, if you would, yes, he's getting 10,000 or more steps in just during this side event. It's remarkable. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Peter Murphy. I'm with CFACT, a NGO based in the United States. And I came late, so I apologize. Are there a list of like 10 commandments now on the environment? I read something about that this morning. Has that been discussed here, or is that...
No, but it's not a bad idea.
Okay. Yeah.
I think there's something being launched next week, which is 10 Commandments on Climate Justice. Do you know about that?
Okay, that's...
Yeah, I think that's coming out next week from a group of faith leaders. Yep, Henrik behind you.
Well, the other thing, just quickly, you mentioned, do you have a concern, and I appreciate your explanation of the biodiversity and preservation. Is there a concern that the proliferation problem? Do you have What do? Oh, do you try that one more time? Do you have a concern about the proliferation of wind turbines and solar panels over farmland and clear-cutting forests? Is there a contradiction, a problem there?
I'll be honest and say I don't know.
All right, that's a very quick answer, but it's a thought-provoking question. We have another question here, and if there are others, please raise your hand so we can get a mic over to you quickly. Please.
Sami from Egypt. Very interesting. Thank you all for all the very interesting speeches. My question to Archbishop Julio about the government involvement with the faith leaders. And what do you expect from the governments to do as in the question of mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage? And then to Sarah in Pakistan, did the government in Pakistan use or get the benefit of the faith leaders in your country as they were dealing with the disaster of the floods? Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Sami, for your questioning. There is an understanding that governments have signed on to protocols and they have signed on to different activities that they should be taking into action in their countries. What I expect is for religious leaders to take the opportunity to inquire what are the protocols that the countries have signed on to, and to be able to come and have dialogue with them to see how they have been working with them or how have they been resolving the difficulties they have been having. The intention is, one, to find out what is happening on the ground in terms of the commitments that the governments have been taking. And if there is one person that can do that, and that the young people are expecting to have that done, are the faith leaders. They say we have influence, so let's put that influence to work.
Thank you, Archbishop. Actually, in Pakistan, related to the flood, the disaster that has hit, funding is coming, and we appreciate that Pakistan is open to funding, and the government is taking strict actions because of the issues of money laundering and because of the issues of the unjust use of money. The government has put a pressure on all the NGOs that whatever money are they getting in response to towards the climate crisis, all the money the government will do the audit, so that just finance should be taken into account, and it should be spent on what it has come for. So this is one good example. And secondly, the Pakistan Army is doing a wonderful job in rehabilitating the flood victims. Along with that, the Church of Pakistan is also paving ways, and the two of the dioceses, the Hyderabad and the Raivin diocese have played tremendous role in towards the response towards climate crisis. And similarly, NGOs are also working in that respect. So it's a great step from our government and the faith actors. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll take one more question, and I will then ask my colleague Bani to try and respond. Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Michal Likvasel. I'm representing the Czech European Union presidency. First, thanks a lot for organizing this event. So much helpful in the midst of these very technical discussions. Within the European Union, the situation is very clear. We have all the policies, we know what the problem is, we have the policies, we have the legislation, we have the money, but we don't have the people on our side. So here I'm turning to you and with a word of gratitude as faith leaders that I believe it's you who can really help get the public on our side, because as it was mentioned, we are talking about value-based policies. We need to make the link between the values that we all were raised with and the problem we are facing. The technical solutions will help us, but not help us with the substance of the problem. So there's no question, just a word of gratitude, and thanks to all of you.
Thank you very much. I think while there wasn't a question, it was a perfect segue to my colleague Bani, who has the daunting task of trying to wrap us up. So thank you again to our panelists, to those who participated remotely, including Azza, who joined us live, and others who sent in recordings. And I'll now turn over the floor to Bani Dugal, who, as she mentioned, is a co-president of Religions for Peace. Bani.
Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you to the representative of the Czech government. I would have said something similar to what you said. I think it's the gulf between intention and action is one of the central challenges that we are facing as humanity. And each of the speakers pointed to different challenges as they've perceived them, and also presented some of the solutions that they're seeing. And I'm going to echo Azza Karam's words at the beginning about the importance of faith actors being agents of behavioral change, and the importance of multi-faith collaboration. Because if each church is going to do things, or each religious organization is going to do things on their own, there will be some good, but once we all collaborate together, we'd see much greater results. Ultimately, it is the individual, the community, and the institutions that have to work together. And we as individuals, because I presume most people here are here as individuals in this room, but you represent your communities and possibly governments. But I think we need that collaboration, because it's not going to happen unless all three protagonists are there for ushering in, the world we need. So I won't take up any more time. It's 4:30. Everyone's had a long day. But I thank you all for coming, and I join the other co-organizers of this event to say it was really a pleasure to have you here, and to the other speakers. And thank you and good night.